I grew up in a household that was just constantly counting calories and dieting and, weight was everything.
Yeah.
And I have told myself that, like, I can't have my kids go through that.
Welcome to the Unapparent Podcast, the place that delivers deeply human stories about the unapparent truths of parenting. My name is Katia and Lindor, and I am your host. Join us as we debunk myths surrounding parenthood and provide an empathetic, judgment-free space for parents and parents to be. We hope you enjoy the show. Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Unapparent Podcast. Today's guest is Sarah Barnaby. I will let her introduce herself a little bit, but Sarah and I have become friends, so I feel like this is going to be a great conversation.
I can't wait.
So tell us a little bit about you and your background and in your career and personal life, if you don't mind, please.
First off, I'm really excited to be here and discuss everything we're going to talk about today. I am a pediatric nurse, and I've been working for 15 or 16 years now. I started in the emergency room. I've always done pediatrics. I worked in a tertiary care center. I've worked in a community hospital. And most recently, I've switched to I work for a temp agency for Northwell that has needs all over the place. And so kind of wherever they have a need, if I feel like I want to go there, I can pick up a contract. And so I go from urology to a pediatrician's office, to hematology, oncology. So a little bit of everything.
Awesome. And you're a mom of two, but perhaps consider yourself a mom of more than two. Talk us through that.
Yes. So I actually met my husband working in the emergency room at Huntington Hospital. And at the time, I didn't have any children, and he had four. Four, but kind of two. One, and then he had one that happened to be three. So I have triplet stepdaughters and a stepson that are now 22 and 20.
And yours are young kids, correct?
Mine are, I want to say 6, but they're 8 and 6.
Okay. Yeah, I've met them. They're all great kids. So how was life? I guess you married into some, stepchildren, but then having kids of your own and with such a busy career, your husband's also, he's a doctor. Mm-hmm. So you guys both have busy lives. Take us back to, I guess, before you became a mom. I understand that you had issues getting pregnant. You had to go through IVF. How was that experience for you?
At the time it was stressful. It's definitely a stressful scenario, and I think that it was difficult. Mm-hmm. I felt a little bit alone, even though I had a lot of support. So I had a lot of support, but no one was going through the same thing I was going through. Mm-hmm. And because my husband did have kids, I felt like
you were going through it for the first time.
I felt like I was going through. Yeah, I was going through it for the first time, and it just felt harder for some reason. And there was a lot of unknowns along the way. It wasn't just like a straightforward, okay, we're gonna do all the steps of IVF and everything works out on the first try. There's a lot of unknowns and weren't always brought up to me by my doctor.
So you felt maybe a little bit like you were lacking information and support in those, I guess, first experiences with IVF, correct?
Yeah, I feel like I loved my doctor. I feel like he was perfect for me. It was a very small clinic, and it was very personalized, and he was wonderful. But I felt like when one thing didn't go right, I didn't know what one of the outcomes would have been. Like, oh wait, I have to wait another month to do this? Oh wait, we can't just do this now? It just felt a little... Yes. I'm a planner, and I like to anticipate what could go wrong, and it just didn't necessarily feel like I was told all the outcomes that could be.
Yeah, for sure. I feel like there's just so much about women's health that if you don't do the research on your own, you don't know, because it's not a priority in the medical field. And that's, I think, something that's changing. Thankfully, there's a lot of amazing doctors nowadays who are kind of realizing that those are where the gaps are, and they kind of need to, make women's health a priority. But we're decades behind. So I feel like that's one of the things, that lack of support at the very beginning, in any scenario, whether it's IVF or even, like a traditional pregnancy,
Mhm.
it seems to be a lot of, oh, I didn't know this. Oh, I didn't know this either. And, figuring it out as you go, which is, part of motherhood and life. But there's something, that I think we could be taught a little better as mothers to be, for sure.
Yes.
So, I
Agree.
mean, you were dealing with also the life as a pretty big family, and then your own kids came into the mix. So, I don't know, talk us through as much of that as you want and feel comfortable.
Yeah, I mean, it was great when I got engaged. My stepson told me, "Now you have to have a boy," and no pressure. Thank God it was a boy,
Yeah.
and they are like best friends when they see each other, and it's really, and my daughter too. My stepkids are just, they don't consider them, a half sibling, which is like the definition, but they're siblings. Like we are one family, and it's been. They're just great with each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've seen that relationship, and it's really sweet.
Yeah.
They are awesome with each other. And, there's such a big age gap with the oldest and the youngest, and it's as if there wasn't, it's really cute. And you are, right, a nurse. How do you feel that your experience becoming a parent has impacted your work as a pediatric nurse?
I think I've become a lot more empathetic, obviously. Like I before I had kids, I would triage patients coming in, and parents would sometimes be hysterical. And there were times that I would judge them for, being overreacting for something that we see as being not that emergent. But then after becoming a parent, even just thinking about how anxiety producing things are as a parent, even though I am a nurse, I think if you're not a nurse and you don't know all this, you're relying on the healthcare system to help you out. And so I try to be, I just feel like I'm a lot more empathetic and understanding where the parents come from versus just, where I was before.
Right. I mean, I think we all us parents understand that we don't think that anyone's going to take care of our kids the way we take care of our kids, right? Because we love them so much. And so naturally you want to trust that the medical professionals know what they're doing, but you're also fearful, and you don't know what you don't know. And yeah, your kids, everything feels like an emergency when it comes to your kids, right?
Exactly.
Because you just want the best outcome possible. So,
And we've also learned that we are not going to, I mean, look, we probably don't take them to the pediatrician as much as someone who's not in the medical field, but we've learned that we really should do that. And we should just not diagnose our own children and let them, have a objective, exam.
That's got to be difficult though, right? Because you're, by trade, what you're doing, but then as a parent, it's also like your intuition, but then should we not? And that must be hard to navigate.
It is weird. We had an occasion where my son was having an asthma exacerbation, and we just, I don't know, like couldn't see it for what it was. And it took us a couple days to treat it the right way.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So we're like, we're not anymore.
That makes me think of totally different, but kind of similar. I grew up playing the violin, and I had a violinist friend whose mom was a violin teacher, and she was like, I'm not going to be the one to teach her violin. Like she had to take her to another, teacher to be objective, right? Yep. And I feel like as parents, we're automatically a little biased and subjective, and we see things through the parent lens, but then that objective eye sometimes is what we need. Other times our parent intuition is, knows more than other people. So, so you and I recently bonded over our adult diagnoses of ADHD, right? And I know you felt like you could relate to an episode I had with my therapist where we discussed parenting with ADHD. So what was it about that episode that really resonated with you?
So I think a little backstory is that I definitely had some postpartum anxiety and saw, therapists for that at the time. And so in my head, it was always, okay, I have anxiety. I was never on any medication or anything for it. Then 2020 happened, and I definitely had some more anxiety. But I always knew, I felt like there was something else. I didn't think it was just anxiety. I had a lot of irritability, and I didn't necessarily think it was just anxiety. Tons of therapists just telling me it's anxiety. Started on a medication, felt a little better. Definitely tolerated my kids being home all the time better. But then I remember my psychiatrist saying to me, where is this irritability coming from? And trying to figure out what she wanted to start me on, depending on where it was coming from. And I said, I gave her some other symptoms I was feeling. And I remember her saying, well, it can't be ADHD because you would have been diagnosed as a kid. And so I was like, okay, like my husband kind of told me, like, I think you have ADHD. And I just was like, no, she said, I don't. She said, it's not possible. And when I look at the definition of what ADHD, typically is, it's the hyperactivity. It's the, you don't do well at school. And I did very well in school. I'm trying to find my notes here. And impulsiveness, like dangerous risk taking. And I didn't fit any of that. So it didn't make sense. I was like, all right, I guess, this is what people say. You're a mom. You have a million things going on. You're doing the mom brain. And this is just normal. This is just, how it's going to be. You have a million things. And I just, so then I just kind of like let it go. Cause I was like, she told me I didn't have it. I don't have it. Then I listened to your podcast and you mentioned, a couple things. You said, why is it so hard for me to just do the chores, tidy the house? I start things, I don't finish. And it made me think it's exactly how I feel. And so I looked into it further. And the more I read up on it, I was like, I meet every other definition of this. Like I have poor organizational skills. I can't focus as well. I'm edgy. I speak out of turn. I interrupt all the time. And then there was another thing that you said that was really changed me. Rejection sensitive dysphoria. And you had said talking about things in a controlled way versus if I could just talk about things in a controlled way versus going at it. It's the end of the world if I don't say something when I want to say it. It feels like a need and resisting it feels physically painful. And when I heard that on the podcast, I was like, that is like, what is that? And so I looked it up with ADHD and that's exactly what I have. And the more I just look into it, everything that they discuss fits how I feel. And then when I also look back to I struggled with bulimia, 100% has to do with ADHD, all connected. And so I was just kind of shocked. And I'm currently trying to find a psychiatrist. And it's very difficult because I'm trying to switch from one to another. And just the barriers of, oh, wait, well, our, so-and-so has to call you back to discuss this, to switch providers. Because I'm not going to go to someone who told me I didn't have it. Right. And, you don't ever get a call back. And that effort to just make that call last week.
Yeah.
It's a lot.
It is. I mean, especially when you haven't been getting the validation that you needed with just saying, oh, let me hear all of these other reasons why you think you have it, right? Because again, going back to our intuitions, sometimes we're wrong, but many times we're not. And yeah, I said how as a kid, I kind of knew I had it and I asked my mom to take me to a psychiatrist. And he was like, there's no way. Kind of similar reasons, like you're not hyperactive. You can sit through this session. You're clearly intelligent and all these like, I guess a misconception of what ADHD is or how it can present, right? Because obviously that is a way it can present in some children, especially. But as you grow, and I kept growing up and I still had issues with the same things, even as an adult, right? With the organization that you said, really being able to hyper focus on certain tasks that I liked, but then the ones that I didn't, it was such a challenge, right? And so just as a refresh for anyone who didn't hear that episode, right, that with my therapist about my own ADHD, becoming a parent is, all of those things are exacerbated because organization is something that you need as a parent. And it's definitely not my forte, to put it lightly. And it adds so many layers of challenges that you were experiencing prior to being a mom, right? And yes, mom brain is really real. I feel like it's real for people who don't have ADHD, but it's that much more, like, as I said, exacerbated when you do have it, right? When you're neurodivergent. And it's one of those things that unless you kind of dig deeper in your own research, it feels like a lot of people won't validate it and don't, I guess I was lucky that the therapist I did have already, she was like, oh, let me hear more about this. And I kind of went more deeper into it. She's like, oh, no, yeah.
Yeah.
Classic ADHD. And I was like, oh, I'd never been told that, even though I kind of thought I did have it.
Yeah,
So-
I mean, I've seen like Doug and I went to a marriage counselor years ago, saw her for years.
Mhm.
She never mentioned the whole rejection sensitive dysphoria. Like, she saw it. She saw me doing it. She saw me interrupting. She saw me not listening. She saw it all. And she's not the one I mentioned. Could it be ADHD? But like, why wasn't that picked up on?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a lot of it is newer, in what I guess is known about it and how it can present, and then in adulthood, I guess it's different than in children, or it can be, and so I guess a lot of just lack of information surrounding it, and I think a lot of shame to say that you have it, right? Because that is such I think an element, as you know, as kids, if you were labeled as the kid with ADHD, you were a problem child, or you couldn't sit still, or you weren't learning in the class the same way, you know. And again, you were obviously a good student, as you said, and it was kind of just brushed off if those weren't the criteria you fit into. But yeah,
it feels more also like shame to say that you don't have it and you're just
lazy.
You're just lazy. This is just who you are. You can't focus. Like, why can't you focus? Why can't you just, remember everything you need to remember? I mean, in the mornings when I get up, it's like I've got the coffee going, and then I'm putting dishes away, and then mid dishes, I'm like, oh, I have laundry in there. And then like, oh wait, I was going to do a smoothie. So I'm opening the freezer. And then like, I'm like, but why can't I do it? If she's telling me I don't have ADHD, why can't I just be like every other parent who I know who just does things, and it's not so much?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. That element of shame being kind of labeled as lazy versus, is I talked about that in that episode, and how I felt shame because my mom, I'm not blaming her, but she would use the word lazy sometimes when, I didn't want to like organize my room. It physically felt so painful to have to do that. It wasn't a matter of just do it. Like, I could just go to the gym. I could just wake up at 6 a.m. and work out and come home and read a book. I could just do those things because I liked it, because it filled me with joy and passion and all of those hormones that I needed to do it. It filled me with those. And picking up my room literally drained me of everything.
Yes.
And like, it was that's like one example, right? But then I'm just like, why can't I just do the laundry? I know I have to do it. And I'm going to eventually get to it, but it's going to take me like 10 times longer than, a neurotypical, right?
And when I do it, like when I'm done and I have folded it and put it away, like I feel like it was like climbing Mount Everest. Like I feel like, oh my God, at least that's done for now. And then I remind myself, like, I got to do that all week, or the rest of the week as well.
Right.
And it's like grocery shopping. It sounds so simple to just plan, to just, quickly meal plan and go grocery shopping. It is
so tedious.
It is so tedious.
Yes.
And it like just like drains me of all the energy I have, and I don't want to do it. So then I procrastinate and yeah.
Oh yeah. Procrastinate is a word I know very well.
Yes.
Growing up. And, let's talk a little bit more about that element of shame, right? Because it ties into this whole societal notion of productivity, and you got to go and do and constantly be producing something for others, right? As parents, obviously, we do things for our children, and that's natural. And there's also those things that we do just because we have to do it, not because it necessarily fills us with joy, right? But, in the bigger, I guess, scheme of life and productivity, it's like, what is it about that we've just kind of believed about ourselves that creates that shame, right? We believe that we need to be constantly productive and constantly doing something and constantly doing something for others. And but don't forget about self-care. But like, no, don't forget about everyone else that you have to please as well, and all the things you need to do and check off your to-do list to feel like a productive member of society. But then we forget about important things, like having a good relationship with our children, that's more important maybe than, I don't know, something, some chore that maybe can wait. And I guess it's redefining that, right? What are some tools, or non-negotiables in your family that you've found that you need to either, redefine or address, or that you've been able to kind of say, no, this is something that is a tool that I'm going to use to help me get through this, and, or just something that's really important that you're like, we're going to do this in our family?
I mean, I touched on, well, I didn't really touch on it. The like food issues were huge growing up. I mean, I grew up in the 90s when like dieting was like everything, and it was just, everything was fat free, and I grew up in a household that was just constantly counting calories and dieting, and weight was everything.
Yeah.
And I have told myself that like I can't have my kids go through that. And I feel like in society it is a little bit better than then. I feel like we've come a long way from just like that. It's more kind of about health in a way. But not, I try really hard to like not shame myself in front of my kids, especially my daughter. I try not to put myself down. Growing up, it was like, well, I shouldn't eat this. I should wait. Diet starts Monday. And like, I try really hard not to use any of that language in the house. And again, it's hard when you grow up in that whole, that culture.
Yeah. I can relate. I've had, I guess, body dysmorphia, and body image issues basically my whole life. And thinking back to how I grew up in my childhood, it wasn't so much, I didn't have like a diet culture household. I just had a really fit mom, right? And she was really healthy. And that's a good thing. In my case, it served me because I've always had a healthy diet, right? And I've always been aware of the importance of having a healthy, balanced diet. And it was never like extreme to the point that like she never shamed, like body shamed me or anything like that, right? But it's like these like small innuendos that you as a child pick up on. It's not even overtly said, right? I was never told, oh, you're fat, or, I was never like body shamed in any way by my parents. But I could, just sense, I would see Victoria's Secret magazines lying around, right? I see. So you see the models. There was no social media, but there was those magazines. And then in Latino culture, I don't know, how much more or less this is there, but, grandmas always have comments like, oh, you look so, thin, or did you gain weight, stuff like that. And that's like, why is that necessary? Like, why is that a comment that's even said, right? And so I just was always hyper aware of, people's, like what they look like, their bodies. And my mom was just always fit. So I was like, okay, well, that's, something that I can work up to eventually. But we have different body types.
Yeah.
And so I didn't fit into that either, like that body type. And so again, how much of it is like taught overtly and how much is kind of just learned from observing the world around you as kids. Kids are smart. Kids pick up on a lot. And as you said, the language is so important. And that's something that I'm constantly working on, like not putting myself down in front of, I have 2 daughters. So it's so important for girls to have a positive body image. And yeah, I'm curious about how much is overtly, taught and how much is just learned. A lot of little girls grow up just thinking that they're ugly. I've heard recently of a mom who has a little 7-year-old, and I guess school. She was bullied in school about something like her lips or something, and then now she's looking herself in the mirror, saying, "Oh, I'm so ugly." And this is one of the most beautiful little girls I've ever seen. That's like kind of side note, but besides the point, also because you just think how sad that a 7-year-old is thinking this of herself. And it's like, where did you learn that? Because it wasn't at home. Obviously, it wasn't the parents telling her any of that, or they probably tell her the opposite, because we tell our little girls how we think they're beautiful. And I try to emphasize that beauty is on the inside.
Exactly.
And that's something that I really try. Obviously, a little 3-year-old, I don't know how much she gets of that, but I'm laying the foundation so that one day that will make sense to her. But you got to start young, because I just hope that the repetition and the showing them, and you have to be their example too, right? So yeah.
I think that's where, like, again, I was never shamed. I was never told I was overweight or heavy or anything. But watching my so my my grandmother was not so nice to, I think, my mom. And so she grew up in a really difficult household where she was shamed. And so I think she just always, was down on herself. And so I saw that negativity. And so I just assumed that, if she's saying something doesn't fit or, she's has 5 pounds extra, like that's bad. That shouldn't be the case. Like then I shouldn't be like that. So it was never, coming from her at least. It's just what I saw. Yeah. And I've seen parents at work, and it drives me insane. We weigh everybody when they come in. And I've seen parents say, wait, what does that number say? And then they make some comment about it. Like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that.
Oh, of their kids.
Of their kids on the scale. And it's really hard to see. And it's, and I try and make a comment to the kid when that happens, like something very like, you're perfect, you're, but it's really, it like breaks my heart to see that coming from their parent who, they need to just have to be supported by.
Right. I don't experience that on a daily basis, right? Like I don't have that kind of career where I'm seeing this, but that's crazy. That's actually shocking to me that in this day and age, because I believe that from several decades ago, that seemed to sort of be more common, but
it's few and far between, but it is still there, and it's very upsetting when it happens.
Yeah.
It's so sad.
Well, in that case, you're directly creating maybe a trauma for your kid. But, in cases like you and me where it wasn't directly from our moms or our parents, it's societal, right? Because it's all around us. And even though maybe in our household we can shield them from that for a little bit, I'm so afraid of when other kids start, creating those traumas in our kids, right? Because you can't control the people around you. And so sadly, it's hoping that we can build so much self-confidence in them that those comments won't sting as much and won't create those traumas for later in life. Because, I know what it's like to grow up, with just this negative body image. And it's really, I don't want that for my daughters. And how much I don't know what the right way to do it is for them not to, and I don't know if I will be able to eliminate that from their future life, but I'm trying.
I think you asked me what else is like a non-negotiable, and I social media is like going to be a big one.
Yeah.
I think that has, again, even just working in the ER and seeing the amount of mental issues with teenagers, younger and younger. And it has a lot to do, I think, from things I've read and have listened to, that it has a lot to do with social media and being just bombarded with images and images and images and comparing yourself. And of course, there's going to be magazines. There's going to be, some bullying in school. But I think waiting until they have developed, almost fully developed their brain, keeping them off of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's a huge one.
And it's so hard, but keeping them off of it.
Yeah, and that's something I think that within reason we were able to we can't remove technology from their life, obviously, because it's everywhere. It's one of those things where you can be rigid and be like, no technology, but they're gonna find access to it somehow because it's everywhere. But limiting or completely not even introducing social media to them until an appropriate age is, I think, going to be a challenge, because I have social media myself, and either I get off of it or, I've thought about it also. They're still really young right now, but you see, as you said, kids younger and younger on, on TikTok, on, I don't know, Instagram. I don't know what they use these days. I feel old saying that, but it's like,
I don't either.
I'm not on TikTok. So I'm like, I know it's kind of like a dark hole once you get on there. So it's one of those things, and apps will continue to be created and developed, and I won't even know about them.
I know. I'm sort of hoping that it just self implodes, it just comes to a head and just
that's
I don't know, goes away.
We'll see. That's a challenge, especially for, I feel like, and I'm not taking away the challenges boys may face. I'm sure boys also face, maybe body dysmorphia and all of that. But, in my experience as a woman, as a girl, it was really challenging because I didn't see my male counterparts struggling with the same thing. And I would, sometimes talk about it with, I have a brother and a sister. And I don't know. It kind of didn't seem to be like an issue for at least my brother. And girls are
tricky.
Yeah, it is, especially because of the societal expectation, and then for us with aging, from the young time, like when you're a young girl, you're expected to look a certain way and act a certain way, and then oh wait, but you can't age when you're older because you lose your value. But no, wait, men can age gracefully, the silver fox or whatever, and it's like.
And then if you do get plastic surgery or any sort of injections or anything, then you're fake.
Yeah.
So then what do you do?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, it's we could probably have a whole episode on this because there's so much. It's so layered as well. But yeah, I think those non-negotiables are something that are going to be in my household as well. That surrounding like food and health and body image, they're all kind of intertwined in a way. And social media, that's going to be a tough one. So, well, Sarah, thank you for your time. Is there anything else you would like to add to our conversation before we part?
I don't think so. I think we hit everything.
Yeah,
that I can think of. And thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for coming on and, sharing your personal experiences. I know sometimes being vulnerable is not comfortable, but we appreciate it on this platform. So thank you.
Yes, my pleasure.
Gracias, and thank you for listening to this episode of the Unapparent Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe as we release a new episode at least every month with an exciting new guest. Be sure to also follow us on Instagram for all the unapparent content you never knew you needed.